video?
I don't know. That's a good question. Oh, I think we're, we launched. Yeah, we did launch. All right.
Okay,
So
here we go.
I never edited anything, so that's going to be on it.
Oh. That's all right. That's a fair question.
Does anybody ever watch this stuff? Wow, this is hold off on that. This is just more for us, isn't it? Who cares about who watches it? Or this is, I don't know, like, there are some data points that you can kind of see, and I don't even look at it. Like, does someone come in through the video of Spotify or some podcast channel and stuff like that? So anyway, hello. We are actually getting started here. Pete Ozolin Eric Staley, guest Bayard Fox today with us. And this is Bending Rules, where we talk about all things entrepreneurial, really just trying to have a dialogue with people about, how they've grown their businesses and how they've sort of achieved, certain results, and when they've had setbacks, and kind of how they've, gone about their life at the same time. I don't think this is just about, kind of material success. So anyways, I'm excited to kind of jump in with one of my good friends here, two of my good friends actually, because Eric's back. But, before I was going to do that, like, I was kind of thinking about something on a podcast that we had like a couple of weeks ago. We had this guy, Jeff Meggy, on. He's a real estate developer, project manager of real estate companies and stuff like that. Employs like hundreds at this point. And and I wanted to ask you guys both about this because it's been kind of on my mind since our last podcast session with him. And he kept bringing up, sort of as part of his motivation to, do all these things and be successful, like what, kind of was trying to figure out like what was driving you to become an entrepreneur and start this stuff. And he's like, man, he kept bringing up insecurity. And I just thought that was an interesting thing, because he's like, I was just insecure about going and doing this job, corporate job. I have this really successful brothers and sisters that are highly educated. His dad like went to MIT and all this stuff. So insecurity was one of his drivers. And I was like, man, I started thinking about that. At the time we were just talking, so I didn't have time to sort of contemplate it. But when I contemplated it, I wanted to go back and think, was that part of my drive? Like, was insecurity part of it? And I was like, oh, well, not really. So I was wondering if that was unique to him. And then I thought about a conversation I had with my dad like 20 years ago. I go, Dad, what made you go into medicine? What made you work so hard? And he goes, I was just motivated by fear. And I was like, wow, this is weird. Like, because insecurity basically is a form of fear, right? And I'm like, what's the role of fear in success? And that's ultimately, that was a long way to kind of set that up. And so I'm wondering for you guys, like, as we sit here and have a cup of coffee about this, like in your own past, whatever one you guys want to jump in, but did insecurity or fear of failure, or did that play into any of your motivations for doing the things that you've done with your lives?
Yeah, I was afraid of being broke, at an older age. That's the last thing I wanted to do, was not have any cash, less options when you have less money, and it didn't have to have a lot of money, but you just had to have more options. And how much money do you need to have to buy those options? And freedom of schedule. Again, I couldn't work for anybody else. I had a tough time working for other people. I just didn't like how they ran the business. And I didn't really like being told when and where I had to be, and I wanted ownership. So I was afraid of being stuck in that grind.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, that was where my fear kind of lands on that kind of.
So there is a fear strain there on some level, and it's more based upon
the future.
Yeah, where you might end up. Okay. All right, that's cool. What about you, Fox?
I think it's a kind of nature versus nurture thing. I think Eric brings up a good point about personality. I learned early on, it was going to be difficult for me to work for somebody else. And I think that's probably more nature, personality.
Yeah.
But then certainly financial insecurity. The insecurity for me was just financial. I grew up poor, and seeing how much of a problem it was in our family and a stress it was for my father, always figuring out the next, where we're going to get money. And so I think that was a huge drive for me. Not so much looking in the future, but just that I was going to put myself in a situation where that wasn't the case, and probably sacrificed some things in life for that.
Yeah.
That, I may regret sometime. But I think it's, fear, risk. To me, risk is a big thing, right? And it's not, you either have an aversion to risk or you don't. There's a gray scale, and everybody has a certain level of risk tolerance. And if you don't have some level of risk tolerance, you're never going to start your own business.
No,
you just won't do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that can also be nature versus nurture, but I do think that has a lot to do with what's baked in.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. And hey, by the way, this is me being totally not too formal. This is my buddy Bayard Fox. He's joined us for the podcast. I didn't even do a proper intro. He's the founder and owner of Cement Elegance, which is his latest company, but he's actually had a number of companies prior to that in his life. And he's not only been an entrepreneur, he's a longtime friend of mine now for 20 plus years. So I've kind of watched not 20 plus, but right around 20. I've watched his business prosper. And at the time when he started that last one in 2010, right around there, or 9, I think he started 9 or 08, but
it's 08, yeah.
08. Okay. Yeah. So even longer, which I love getting into that story because that's on the heels of a recession, which, none of our kids have really, or, nephews or nieces have really lived through that yet. Cause we're all about the age we're at. So they're about to see
Not
that.
Yet.
Yeah, they're about to see that in their professional career and how to come out of that. And that's a whole other conversation. But I did want to introduce Bayard, and because I think his journey, there's a lot to sort of get into, and jumping back now that I've actually done the intro just to what you said, and thinking about you two guys, because that's kind of a common thread with both of you guys. Grew up because Eric's told his story on the pod, and so have I. But there's some similarities with Oak Ridge, not growing up a lot of money. What does that look like?
Oak Ridge,
yeah,
in Oregon.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Lumber, sort of town perspective. Your dad had goals that he wanted to make. Have financial results. He shared those with Eric, but he put those on hold. Those things were never done for one reason or another, and you kind of, through that lens, you're like, holy smokes, what do I need to do to get to not be in this scenario, to some extent, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but there's some interesting parallels, there for both of you guys.
I also think that it doesn't mean if you grow up in a comfortable financial household that you're not going to be a successful entrepreneur. It's not a criteria that you grow up with financial insecurity. I think that there's a certain amount of everyone wanting to be successful in their life. What that looks like for everybody is different, but I don't know anybody that maybe non-entrepreneurs worked for somebody else their whole life, but that doesn't have that inner desire from day one in their financial or in their professional career to be successful.
Yeah.
I think it comes down to, what level of risk are you willing to take to achieve that?
I want to go back to that risk tolerance too, in nature and nurture that you were talking about a bit ago. Is there anything you feel like you did along the way coming up as a kid or at any stage in your life that you enhanced your risk tolerance? And if you did, how did that kind of manifest itself? Because I talked about sports and swimming in rivers and biking and 3-wheelers and just taking risks on things that I was allowed to do. So I was just kind of curious if you feel like there was anything like that with you.
I don't know necessarily. I think a lot of that was, well, I don't want to give it all up to the personality or nature, because certainly growing up on a ranch and a farm as well, my father was, we were driving tractors when we were 8 years old, and that gave us a level of confidence, I believe, that you can really do a lot more than you think you can do.
Yeah.
My first real entrepreneurial experience actually reduced my risk tolerance, probably to a fault.
The first business you took on?
First business I started, and,
Wow.
and it was, part of it was, again, when you risk, it's not just financial risk. People think, well, your risk tolerance to start your own business is all financial. Well, that's one element of it.
Oh yeah.
But there's so many other things. There's, getting into a business with a partner. That's a huge risk. That was a risk I didn't perceive when I started my first business because it was with somebody else. And so that was a kind of a blind spot for me is, I didn't have financial risk in my first business because my partner was taking the financial risk. My risk was dedicating a certain period of my life to a business that I didn't ultimately control.
Mm-hmm.
And the blind spot there, it's real. Sometimes it works out for you. It worked out great, but there's probably a lot more examples where it didn't work out when it comes to partnering up with somebody. So that experience was a nature experience that really, really took my risk tolerance way down. And probably today, the business that I have could be a lot bigger and more successful had I not had that experience. Potentially.
Interesting. Yeah.
Potentially. Because my risk tolerance to leveraging completely went out the door. My risk tolerance to leaning on a partner completely went out the door. So that experience brought it back to I'm relying 100% on myself and my own financial capability so I can determine my destiny without any other input. But I don't, as a kid, I think that, the risk tolerance was more just the way we were brought up, and also, just personality wise, like we talked about earlier, just that, I don't think that I would have ever been happy having somebody else dictate my schedule.
Yeah.
And that's, that seems small, but at the end of the day, that gives me satisfaction.
Well, and you, in this scenario, you even remove the option of having a partner because that would reduce your level of sort of autonomy, essentially. Mm-hmm. Even if it was in your mind, you were able to perceive as the right partner. And as I was kind of listening to you say that, I was thinking about, we all relate things to sort of our own journeys a little bit, right? So I'm relating like, wow, well, what if that happened to me? What would that look like? Would I continue that path? How much do I need a partner? Because Eric, you've been pretty much a solo operator too.
Here and there, I had partners, but not often. Like 2 out of 20.
Whereas I've been kind of the opposite. Like I've always had someone that, a few founders or at least one other co-founder. And I don't know if I told you this, Bayard, but like with the first business, Eric knows this because I talked about it on another podcast at one point, but I had a really difficult partnership where the guy like quit on me like 3 different times, and he'd come in like, it's hard enough to build a company, but and my heart's not into it. I'm out, get the paperwork ready. I'm like, getting the paperwork ready, and then like he disappears for like a month, and he's back, and he's like, no, I'm feeling good. I just got my bearings now. Like, I'm like, meanwhile, but I've been working. Like you need to work to be here. Like that's, So there's all that kind of, and ultimately we end up pushing that guy out of the business, right? About 2-3 years later, after we raised some money, and he made money on the transaction, and we sold the company. That was the difference. We still had a financial outcome that was positive, right? And knowing a little bit about your story, that first risk kind of cost you time, and it didn't cost you money, but it cost you a lot of time. And that's the same as money to some degree, because you could be making money doing something
opportunity
else.
Cost, yeah.
And I wonder, just from the psychology of it, like if that had cost me, that would have cost me money too, right? Because at that point I got money into it. I got my parents, I put the seed money in. That was we'll talk about that, some seed money stuff. But I don't know, man. Maybe I wouldn't have had partners after that. But it just, for me, it softened the blow of the journey a little bit, because it's
for sure.
It's such a dark journey at times.
There's an absolute desire, and again, it's fear based. It's insecurity based to partner up with somebody to spread that risk and to spread the a fear of failure. I mean, if you fail, you could always blame it on somebody else, right? But there is that desire when people start a business. Maybe it's not a financial reason for somebody bringing money into the deal. It's just, I want to have somebody to do this with and to bounce ideas off of. And so there's a huge incentive for that.
I thought you were calling me out and saying that I had a lot of fear. I said, I don't think I was afraid, but now I realized, God, I was afraid.
Maybe
I
not.
did have some fears I'm not acknowledging. That was probably one of them. Frankly, like, do I want to take this on myself? And no, I'm more comfortable, so
yeah,
it's got to be in there somewhere, right?
Yeah, for sure. Sure. I think fear is, because from the beginning, it's a big thing. And like you said, insecurity is really just fear. But fear of failure too. I mean, it's the one thing of, your risk tolerance of whether or not you're going to succeed financially, but then the fear of failure. I mean, that is probably the single biggest thing that keeps people from pursuing entrepreneurship, if that's what they think they want to do.
Yeah.
They don't want to fail, and none of us want to fail.
Yeah.
But you're not going to be successful if you don't fail. We all know that.
Yeah.
So, if that fear of failure is going to dominate your life, then you shouldn't do it. If you're able to get over it and move on to the next thing. Even in the last 15 years since moving to Bend, I've had several failures. But I didn't dwell on them too much.
Yeah. You got more focused. You got more comfortable with it, or just understood it as
more comfortable with it. It's part of the process.
Part of the process.
No
one loves it. Stress is introduced in your life, but what are you going to do? You got to keep going, right?
I guess that'd be like a boxer in his first match. He goes in and gets TKO'd. He's like, I'm done boxing. It's like, well, yeah, you're going to lose if you're going to box.
Yeah, you're not a boxer. Then.
You're not a boxer. Yeah, there's a Mike Tyson, and he even lost. You know what I mean? Like, there's very few people who didn't actually end up failing.
Right.
You learn the most from those failures too, don't you?
For sure. I mean? You bring up a good point, though. Like the point of even starting something because you can't overcome the fear of failure. Okay, so the three of us obviously have overcome that. We're comfortable with that to some extent. Maybe we're driven by it when we're actually in it. Like, I don't want to fail because of my reputation and all that. I don't even think about that anymore. But earlier on, that was probably something there. But man, I was talking to this entrepreneur just the other day about his business, and he was kind of taking this one path. And I was saying, well, I don't know, that seems like a pretty conservative way to go about starting your business. Like, why don't you just do like this way, and I won't get into the minutia of it, but he was like, well, we don't want to take the risk. And, it's more of and he was just, I could feel he was just afraid of it all, and I get it, but to what you were just saying, and Eric, you too, I mean, it's like, if you never get out there, it's never happening. I just thought something kind of funny that was related to this. It's a segue that's related. It was on The Simpsons, and
perfect.
Marge and what's his name, Homer, were talking, and Marge goes, "Hey, I think I found something I want to do professionally, Homer, and I want to go and be a real estate agent." And he goes, "Marge, it's a bad idea. The first step to," he goes, trying is the first step to failure. and you encourage her not even to try,
Yeah, that's funny.
And so instead of looking at it as the first step to success, as we should look at it, I don't know, a lot of people see it as you were saying, like it keeps them out of the game, So clearly you overcame that. You kind of had something in your childhood that built up this risk tolerance, like you were saying, the Jeeps and the autonomy. And
yeah, I think that built up confidence. I think confidence helped have that tolerance for risk.
So did you work, even though you knew you were going to work for someone long term, did you have any experience where you kind of worked for someone and they were like, okay, that's enough time, I learned something or whatever, and I need to ripcord out of here? And
I think you absolutely need to work for somebody else for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't know. From a young kid, I just knew that was something I wanted to do. I wanted to start my own business. My dad was an entrepreneur. He was a farmer. He was answering to nobody. So I kind of had that in my mind. And but I would, I mean, if either one of my sons wants to graduate college and start a business right away, I'm not going to support that necessarily. I mean, I know you kind of did that with your dad, and that's awesome.
Yeah.
I guess it depends on the situation, but I don't think that you have any sense of what you have to do that. You have to work for somebody else. You have to show that you've got perseverance and that you've got a good work ethic, and that you can perform for somebody else before you can do it for yourself. I mean, that's just what I feel like. I'm sure there's people that have never worked for somebody else in their life and been very successful. I don't know if you ever did.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I worked since I was 12,
Yeah.
all kinds of different jobs throughout high school and college and after. Yeah.
And after. Yeah.
Yeah.
But did you guys ever work for anybody more than 2 years?
Oh yeah.
Did you?
Yeah.
At one thing, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. I kind of felt like you got into it pretty quick in the stuff that you were doing.
I had a 7-year run out of college of just working straight. I needed to be financeable.
Yeah.
For home loans.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that's what I wanted to do, and I had to be financeable somehow. So yeah, I just augured in and just did my time.
Was it the same company or was it
different companies? 2 different companies over 7 years.
Okay, so you lasted, Carl, on average 3.5 years at one place at least.
One of them went under actually, and so I was kind of forced to move along. So yeah,
but you also learned you stayed somewhat in that industry, right?
I did. Yeah, just
so
for
that's
lendability.
Yeah,
congruity of income is an important thing for lenders, and so I didn't want to jump from that to doing something else altogether because at the time that was important. I imagine it still is, but yeah.
But you also probably learned quite a bit about the industry along the way too. It wasn't just to be financeable, but you also learned the real estate industry a little bit, right?
Oh man, it was an engineering firm, one after another in Bend, right, that I worked for, but civil engineering. There's all kinds of projects, and we're testing foundations and the subgrade, the soil underneath a house, the concrete. There's a lot of houses that are built on slope around here, on some of the buttes, like even like this.
For sure.
And so when you start excavating down and backfilling in around, I got around all kinds of stuff like that. Things that were moving in Bend that were happening, a project that's coming up. We got this Wood River Village. Actually, they had an exploratory sewer program that they got funding for to put, because they're on septic down by the river. And so they put a pump station in, and knowing about this early through some of the people in the industry, I had inside information on, this is going to be an up and coming area once they put this in, and it's already been funded. So, I mean, I had a heavy tailwind on that. That was my first rental as I bought down there at Wood River Village based on that. So I was around the industry enough, kind of the early stages of real estate, like before subdivisions even, cut up.
Yeah.
So did you have did you have the same experience? Like, did you have a job for longer than 2 years, 3 years before you, and what were you, what trade was that in?
It was, it was just to get a job. I worked for load and luggage and Delta Airlines planes for a year after college. When it was 1991 when I graduated, and we were in a recession at that time. It was not, I don't know if it was technically a recession, but it was difficult to find work.
Yeah.
But then I got into the building industry.
Yeah.
And not just something I felt comfortable with. It was kind of a hands-on type of an industry, nuts and bolts kind of industry. And yeah, I worked for 3 years for somebody else selling, products to builders before I kind of started my deal. I started moving in the direction of wanting, doing my own thing within that industry, and I'm still kind of in that industry.
Yeah.
What was the first business that you did?
It was carpet and tile and hardwood, basically all the interior surfaces in new construction.
Yeah.
So I started. I had a
installing, or
we sold and installed. Yes.
Okay.
And to some accounts we would only sell materials, but a lot of it we installed. But when I started, it was just me, and I had an account, which is I still a friend of mine here today that builds 2,000 homes a year. So I would go to his subdivisions with carpet and vinyl samples and sell his customers carpet and vinyl to all his places throughout the Northwest. And the next week I would get in a Penske rental truck and get carpet and vinyl in it and go deliver it to the job sites.
Was that where your idea came from? Is that you had this connection already? you kind of already had a connection to 2,000 homes, you know?
I did, but my business now doesn't sell to that type of builder.
Yeah.
But I had
back in the day.
Back in the day, yeah. I mean, it was kind of where I found myself, you know, after doing the airline thing and then I got into sales, actually worked selling appliances for a while and then got into this carpet business and was there for 2 or 3 years, picked up this big account and then took that account and partnered up with this other guy and started a new business.
Oh yeah. So that's pretty secure, you know, knowing that you have a client already.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
That's cool.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't just go in and go, okay, I'm going to start this business. Yeah, absolutely. Had a leg up for sure.
Yeah, but you got the customer. So like these are the inflection points entrepreneurs have. So how did you develop that relationship? How did you get that first big builder that became like your catalyst and maybe to some extent your seed funding? I know the other guy financed the stuff too, but like how did that come about? Because that's a great
working for somebody else.
But you made a call. Did you cold call? Did you guys meet somewhere? Like how did you
call and just?
But how did you meet him? Like to start that, because that's like landing the one that changes your basic trajectory at that point for that business. I know it didn't apply to your next business, which I want to talk about that too, because to me that's pretty fascinating, the timing of that. But I'm just curious because that's such an important event, you know, that you were able to build on.
Partly is luck. You know, we haven't talked about luck here, but that was part of that was luck. Just I was persistent and I was calling and trying to set up a meeting and finally got through. And part of it was luck that the owner of that company was my age and we hit it off right away. And one thing led to another. And then all of a sudden that was, you know, the relationship was with me. It wasn't with the company that I was working for.
Exactly.
And
it's really cool.
So at the time when I was ready to go on my own and do my own thing, and I actually did my own thing with him for a year or two before partnering up with this other guy. So yeah, I think it was persistence, and luck.
So then comes the decision to partner,
right?
And what was the money was part of it, maybe the biggest part of it. I mean, what was your kind of thinking, you know, at that point?
Well, I wanted to, you know, I was young and I wanted to grow a business, and the guy I partnered with was a mentor to me, actually. That I had met in my first sales job selling appliances, and he was a very charismatic person. He was one of those guys that would get up. I mean, when I left that business, we had just under 300 employees, and I was running the business. I was the nuts and bolts and the executor of the business, but he was the one having all company meetings and getting up and inspiring the group. And that wasn't my forte. Yeah. And I knew that when I partnered up. I felt like I needed to have somebody like that to really push things forward beyond what I had capabilities of doing. And, you know, it worked out great for a while. But then his biggest strength became his biggest weakness.
Right.
And he fell completely off. So I had to exit after spending 12 years in building this big business. And even though I didn't have financial risk initially when we started the business, I lost everything. Because a year after I left, he filed bankruptcy, and you know, I didn't get anything out of the deal. So I had a huge financial loss, and completely starting over at the age of 40 years old with nothing, actually less than nothing. But that's a whole nother story. And again, I don't blame it on him. A lot of that is up to me, you know, being one of my personality traits that is, I think, good and bad. Again, you know, this stuck in my head when I don't even remember what book I read it out of. It was people's strengths can become their weakness. Yeah. And my strength of being loyal really became my biggest weakness, because I didn't recognize and see the writing on the wall till it was too late. And again, that experience shaped, you know, what I have today, which is I'm not relying on anybody. I don't have a bank and I don't have a partner. And, but you know, like I said, I sacrificed because, I'm confident that had I not gone through that experience, I probably today would have leveraged the business more and probably have, a higher volume type scenario. But
yeah, that's interesting because I've known you obviously for a long time, but I've known you and seen you grow Cement Elegance and, have different products within that business and finance those products. And I always just kind of assumed that we never really talked about, but I assumed that big chunk of that was leveraging it up, and you were kind of growing that organically and controlling basically your destiny is what you're saying, and juxtaposed to sort of my scenario. While I raised money, I was always in control, right? And they were always minority shareholders, especially the last one, right? Because I had similar downside experience where we weren't in control. We raised too much money. Thankfully, in that particular business, I was like the third or fourth founder, and I wasn't like the main guy, and I had a little bit of money into it, but it wasn't like, but I got to see the whole thing play out. I was like, whoa, blip in the economy, this and that. Now you got a financer that's put in all this money, and it changes everything. I mean, and we could talk about our failures here for probably hours, because all of us have had them to some extent. And I guess the key is, do you get back in the game? The boxer analogy. I don't know, man. I don't know if a lot of people do that. Yeah. That's a pretty big hit, dude. Like a 12-year run and coming out and being 40. So I got to commend you for that. Like, I guess for me, would have been probably one of two options. I would have tried again, because you're still young enough at 40 to give it another shot, or I'm going to Costa Rica and flipping tacos and investing more in my serving capability.
Trust me, that
maybe I'm not cut out for this world of business.
The food truck on the beach was definitely looking good at that point.
Because business is hard, man. It's hard to start a business, and you got to re-up again. So,
and when you have a 2-week-old and a 3-year-old, and
this is about right the time you're landing at Bent, right? You landed a little bit before that, because I think you were maybe 38 when you got here.
Yeah, so I was still going through I was exiting out of the business, hoping that he was going to survive and be able to pay me out, but knew that I had a short window to figure something out. And again, it came down to financial. I mean, we were broke. Family and 2 young kids, and everything's gone, and got to figure something out.
Well, let's, if you don't mind, just talking about that a little bit, like your entry point and, how you saw that opportunity, how you were able to take advantage of that opportunity, because from the outside perspective, that's not a good thing. I don't want to lose battery here. From the outside perspective, I was like, grab that one. Okay, we'll edit that out. Well, look, I thought I was all plugged in. Oh, there you go. All right. Well,
watch your step there.
Don't hit that again.
You got the high hurdles.
Here we go. Okay. So from the outside perspective, I was like, wow, you and I were talking about a lot of different businesses and concepts at that time. Like, because we were both in the same spot. Like, I hadn't started Manzama, you started Cement Elegance, and then you start going down this process where you're buying this business. More or less, you're kind of finding your opportunity. And man, the timing on that was good, because you kind of drove I don't know if drive's the right word. I don't know. Just tell me what made you feel like that was the right deal at that time, because you're coming out of recession.
Yeah, I know.
This is 08. Like, we're in the like the dark times. I mean, it's hard for people to think back on that, but that was like crazy.
Yeah, I don't really know. I mean, again, it was a necessity. It was financial insecurity. I mean, it was a need to do something. And we talked, and I'd looked at a lot of different things. And one of the things I didn't do when I left my former career was leverage my experience in that industry. I had that opportunity. I could have started a flooring business or a builder supply business. But honestly, I was kind of burnt out on that. I also recognized, in that prior business, we got up to 60 million in revenue, and we were putting less than 2% to the bottom line. That kind of risk and that kind of leverage to put 2% to the bottom line, to me, I looked at that business model and I said, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be in a scenario. It's just tight margins. You're a reseller of a product, and there's huge competition out there. And so your ability to get margin is very limited. So you have to drive volume, and with that comes huge accounts receivable. And when you're only putting that kind of money to the bottom line. So one of the things that did shape me is I don't want to be on the resale side. I don't want to be on the retail side of the world. I want to be on the manufacturing side. Because there's a lot more margin potential there. So that kind of drove me to think, okay, I want to be on the manufacturing side, but I have no money. So I'm going to have to start small. And I built a deck on my house. And when the deck was done, I looking for a fire pit, couldn't find anything I liked, and started researching concrete and how to make concrete crack free. Nobody was really doing that. And that's how it all kind of started. Came across a guy who was wanting to get out of the business, had one employee, and was failing doing decorative concrete countertops, and basically took over his employee and some of his tools and sent him on his way. And
kind of didn't earn out with him a little bit, kind of sunsetted him out.
Yeah. And then it was just, then it was, okay, we're going to just try to take this small little niche business. And at the time I thought, I'll leverage some of my contacts in the industry. Although the prior business was more production builders, kind of lower price point. And this product was going to be more of a high end product. So there wasn't a lot of leveraging I could do there, but I felt like it was a good opportunity to get into a manufacturing side of the business in a very niche, small industry where there wasn't a lot of competition. So the ability to make good margins. And today we make 60% gross margins still today. So we're putting 25 to 30% to the bottom line. So it's a complete shift. And again, I don't think I would have even understood that concept had I not had that prior experience being in that industry. But I had to find it, we had to make that kind of margin because I had to finance our lifestyle or, pay the bills at home and grow the business at the same time. And, that's not easy when you're not getting loans to do it. It's just, the first year, I think we made $70,000 and that all went to pay our mortgage. The next year was 120.
Yeah.
And it just, we just kind of kept building upon that and innovating and putting anything I didn't need for our household was staying in the business to buy a piece of equipment or to do research and development to continue to make the product better. So
during that reinvestment period, how many years did you pretty much just shovel the bulk of the money back into the business, aside from your house bills and that sort of thing? How many years do you think you went through that?
I didn't start taking money out of the business significantly until probably 5 years ago. So first 10 years.
10 years.
Yeah, 10 years.
So you can hold your breath financially. That's part of the risk of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like, how long can you hold your breath, and do you want to?
And do you want to?
Because you're working for free practically.
But it was growing that whole time.
No, I know, but
it was
so
growing.
you were excited about that.
But
right.
Yeah, but you're tight on money, and you're kind of working a lot for free. It seems like when you start a business, you that's how I look at it. Is I don't get paid at all until the project sells or until your business is 10 years, profitable.
Right.
That's when you can start pulling back. It's how many entrepreneurs make the mistake of pulling money out early, on the quick.
Absolutely. And it happens all the time today, especially in the tech world, right? It's you raise money to pay all these people. And, that just can this run rate, the burn rate type of scenario. And gosh, that's just to me, again, that's a risk tolerance that I probably from my former life, I did not want to get into. I didn't want to owe anybody money. I didn't want to borrow money. I didn't even want to borrow money. I could have went out and gotten a loan. I didn't do it.
Yeah.
I just didn't want to do it.
Do you think it was an advantage growing up on the poor side of things that you can just be poor again?
Absolutely. We completely reset.
Question.
It's a very good question.
Yeah.
And fortunately, I was married to somebody who also was willing to do that.
Oh, that's giant.
It's giant.
Wow, that's giant.
Yeah. I mean, because we were living high on the hog in Portland, And, you know, we had the house we live in today still was a rental home. It was, you know, we're building equity, and I always wanted to kind of move to Bend. So I had planted the seed, and I had this vision of moving to Bend. I didn't know it was going to happen the way it did. So, we had 2 rental homes here, had to sell one when the whole recession hit. But yeah, I remember sitting down, and I put together a full household budget with my wife. And it's like, okay, this is what we've got to live on. And it could be 4 or 5 years. And she was like, yeah, absolutely. Let's do it.
See, she had the vision too. Well, when that vision is fractured within a household, man, where do you go from there?
Where do you go from there? Yeah. No, it's really tough. That's a really good thing with that's one of probably the biggest things with marriages is, that can break them is financial stress. And if you don't both go into it knowing, hey, if things don't work out, we can recover. That's a tough one.
Delayed gratification for everybody in the household, including the kids.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's opportunities missed probably for your kids too that I can't even imagine.
Yeah, but they don't know that now.
No. They don't know it, but maybe just the cost of sports nowadays, in school.
Yeah.
It just blows my mind what you got to pay.
Yeah, no, it is. It's kind of crazy.
Are your kids into sports?
Yeah. Well, they were. My one's in college, and he's not doing sports anymore. And my youngest is in and out of sports. They both had sports, and been active in them.
Cool.
Yeah. No, and I think that's a huge thing too.
We did some coaching together, Eric. We coached a little kids soccer when they were little, like first, second grade, and some flag football.
So what do you know about soccer?
I played soccer in high school too. Yeah, because in Washington, it's in the spring. So those are my 2 sports, was football and soccer. Soccer, which I was the worst at, but I still was on varsity and did all that. But we had a really good soccer team, and I was like, not one of the better guys, basically. Like there would be 8 guys that get all conference, and I wasn't one of them. But I still liked it a lot, and
I didn't realize you'd played. So I just like the idea of coaching soccer and having not played at all. You know what I mean, for the kids anyway. But that's a risk tolerance in and of itself.
Yeah, there's probably some people out there that definitely do that. But
absolutely.
So much of coaching though is not about the actual sport. I think,
developing people.
Yeah, you know the rules as it is. It's
especially
developing
at that
people,
age,
especially at that age. It's all just about teaching them failure and how to recover from it. And yelling.
It's all about yelling. There's a lot of yelling at them. Get in their face.
Toughening them up.
Sorry.
We kind of glossed over it, but I feel like this is a bit of an important part of the story, which was like he kind of said, well, I identified this guy that had one employee, he had his business, and it was failing. What about it made you feel like you could succeed where it was failing, I guess, because that's a risky thing too. Well, this guy's been at it for a while, because he'd been at it for a while,
mm-hmm.
right? It wasn't like a year. He'd been at it for how long? And it only gotten so big.
No, he'd been at it for probably 5-6 years.
So what was he doing that you felt, you could do better, but I don't know. I guess I'm just kind of curious, like looking at that, like what did you have that he was lacking? That's fair to say.
I think people skills, one of the things I wanted, one of the things thinking about coming in here and doing this and talking about kind of some of the traits that are needed in being an entrepreneur. And it's something that I think, again, a lot of people overlook. It's like how, it depends on the business. I mean, some businesses can be very successful with 1 or 2 people. The manufacturing business doesn't work that way. And, the sensitivity of people and how to work with employees is something, again, I mean, if I just acted the way I wanted to act and dictated to people, this is what needs to be done, and when they didn't do it, fire them, then you wouldn't be successful, right? It's just there's a huge learning curve in how to manage and inspire people, and without people, I would have no business. I'm not making anything. Even from day one, I mean, I would be out on the job sites and I would measure and stuff, but I didn't make a dang thing. I've never made a piece of concrete in my life.
Yeah.
You didn't do your own fire pit?
I did not do my own fire pit. Did not even do my own fire pit. No. No, I started doing all this research and then came across Kim. And I didn't even make my first fire pit till I was in the business for 5 years.
Yeah.
So And I think that's overlooked by so many people. The sensitivity, of employees and not demotivating them, but motivating them. It's not a skill that comes naturally to people. It just isn't. I think anybody who's looking at doing anything, they just have to look at that and go, look, if I'm not somebody who has that ability or can learn how to do that,
wants to invest the time
and can treat people with respect, then again, I don't think you're going to be successful. There are businesses certainly that can be successful that doesn't require a lot of inputs from people. Certainly. But yeah, I think that's a huge, huge thing for me. And I still learn it. I mean, I've got the business dialed in right now, and, I spend a lot of time not at work, but I'm currently dealing with one of my key employees and another key employee who are not getting along. And I'm the mediator. Mm-hmm. And if I don't have that skill to mediate that, things fall apart.
Yeah.
And even today, 15 years in the business, and these are two employees, one of them is my very first employee that I took over. And one is a very key employee who's been there for 7 years, and they're both pretty much the highest paid people, and they're leaders of the company, and they're not getting along. So, I don't just get this thing going and walk away. It just, unfortunately, that's just not the case. And a lot of people think that. They're like, I'm going to get this business going, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to go there, and the business is going to get, take care of itself.
Yeah.
It's just not a reality.
Yeah.
Even with, my peer group, my YPO group, I mean, everyone tries that. They try to get to their business to a certain point, hire a person or promote a person to run the business so they can exit out and still get paid.
Yeah.
And there's a level that you can do with that.
Yeah.
But it is very challenging.
Yeah. Does it then start slowly degrading?
It starts to
degrade. Or is it a sudden a big thing? And, no, I hear what you're saying. I feel I've seen similar scenarios in the stuff that I've gone through as well. I guess building on that a little bit, because you just segued into something I'm always curious about with entrepreneurs. And I just talk about, so you just said one trait was sort of I'll sort of summarize it, this ability to, essentially lead and inspire and manage people. Okay. So that's one trait you think a successful business owner needs to have, that's going to employ people or have contractors or whatever. So Eric, your perspective is, I think it's important here too. Do you have two other traits? I'm always what are the three traits that you think are necessary? If you were telling your kids or you're evaluating another entrepreneur, you're kind of looking for three traits. Either you're going to be an investor in their business, or you're just giving them advice. What would you say are the three things?
No, you touched on, I would say you touched on one of them at the beginning is you have to work, and you have to work. You have to be wanting to work. You have to be willing to work. You have to have perseverance. Perseverance is probably the word that sums it up. Is you
like that?
You have to have perseverance. You have to look at it and go, man, this didn't work, but I'm going to keep doing this, and a work ethic. Gotta have a work ethic. At a point now at my age, at 54 years old, I mean, somebody might well, what's your work ethic? You work 25 hours a week.
Boom. I love it. Yeah.
But, I've put myself in that situation.
Yeah, exactly.
Through a heck of a lot of perseverance and sacrifice. And I don't know any entrepreneur that has gotten to where success without perseverance. What do you think?
That's a good one. I like that. What do you say, Eric? You kind of hit on yours before, but
we were talking about risk tolerance a bit ago.
Yeah,
and that's
a trait you have to have. You got to have a trait for
That's the bedrock. I think if you don't have that, then you're not going to get into doing it.
Right.
Like we were talking about earlier, for sure. And that's the one that I always wonder how somebody could get past if they're at a low level of risk tolerance. Is this something that can be trained or
Yeah, I don't know either. I have a friend who worked for Nike for 25 years, and he was a college buddy of mine, and he just always wanted to do his own thing, but just was never willing to pull the trigger. And he would always talk to me, and it's you inspire me because you've done all these things and you've taken these risks, and I just don't know if I have that in me. And good for him. About 5-6 years ago, he finally left Nike and started a consulting business, and he's doing phenomenally well. It might have just been a point in his life that got him to a point where he was willing to make that risk. Or take that risk, but he by nature was a very more conservative person. So to answer your question, I think you can get beyond that. I mean, he certainly took a risk. It was, leaving quite a bit of, I don't know how Nike works with options and all that stuff, but he left quite a bit on the table to do it. And he's happier than he's ever been.
I agree. I think about doing stand-up comedy or something like that, and you go get in front of the mic and you don't have material that's worked out or anything. You're built in, you're going to fail. I mean, I've heard comedians talk about it takes them a year to get 5 minutes of reliable material that's actually worthwhile and funny. And, the failure rate there is horrendous. A year to get 5 minutes.
Yeah. Right.
And that's not, unless you're some savant, you're, Dave Chappelle, and so you could build risk tolerance by doing other things. You know what I mean? Like maybe just doing an open mic or poetry slam or, it doesn't, like you said, it's not all about on the business or the financial side of things, but that's a skill I think that can be honed. I want to figure out how to, come up with every example possible on how to hone that, because if you don't take that first step towards failure, you're not going to have a chance of being an entrepreneur. I mean, you're not going to start a business. You're just going to stick with that ordinary income, that paycheck, that reliable paycheck every month or every 2 weeks,
And we want people out there like that. Not, and it may come across bad, but no, I mean everybody has their thing, and everybody's got their skill set. And not everybody can be an entrepreneur.
Totally. And you and I have talked about that, and I'm always really reluctant to actually push people into entrepreneurship, because I enjoy it and I've had a result from it, or you guys have, or we can't do anything else. Like there's those similar patterns. We're not employable and all the other stuff that we talk about. But I'm always reluctant because if there's just a lot of costs that come with it too. And I just feel that it's not fair to suggest things with people when they don't know the cost totally. They have to have that, innate desire, because once you're in it, you're in it. So, we've talked about the risk tolerance thing and making that decision and getting in the game. There's a lot of trepidation that goes into that. Less for some, more for others, obviously. Like that was never one of my things, maybe not one of your things either. I mean, I was scared, but it was just like, well, whatever, but then there's the rest of it. Like the perseverance you just said, like, holy smokes, man. Yeah. Like I was watching the NVIDIA, I told Eric this, I was watching him on, getting an interview, and this guy now is probably one of the richest guys in the world, right? And he's like, I wouldn't do it again. Yeah. If I had to do my life over again, I wouldn't do it again. Even he goes, I didn't know what I didn't know. It would take all this, and I'd lose partners and risk and then. So not everybody pays that high of a price, right? But there's got to be a little bit of a cost to it, and rare is the scenario. Maybe your second or third iteration or your fourth or fifth project, but rare is a scenario where it just goes super smooth right out of the gate and everything. You're just building on it every year, right? I mean, rare. More so, all these things happen. So
economies come and go in the middle of it.
The stomach for it and all that kind of stuff. And I think it's important to acknowledge those potential downsides. And I was talking to another guy about this, and he was like, do you feel like you need to, when you start a company, you need to be all in, like it's everything or nothing, like, or just, say starting to build your real estate project portfolio business? And both of us were kind of like, pretty much, yeah. And I don't know what you guys feel, but for 4 or 5 years, but the goal is, can you get to a place where you can do, if you still love it, still do that and have all this time like you have right now? Like, that's why it's kind of an admirable result as being your friend. Even if I wasn't, just from the outside in, I'm like, this is what he's done it, right? And I want people to understand that that's sort of a possibility in this thing too, right? There is a reward that comes there potentially, despite all the costs and the setbacks, and it's not guaranteed. We all know that. We've seen people. You had a 12-year business where it didn't, So I don't know. I'm kind of rambling on about this, but I don't know, the perseverance is, I like that trait. I think that's a pretty big one too.
I think people risk tolerance, fear of failure, and people and perseverance would probably be the three biggest for me. I think the other thing is not getting. I could have 5 years ago started taking money out of the business, and I think a lot of people taste some success and live a little bit beyond their means. I've seen it happen time and time again.
Yeah.
And that puts a huge strain on the business.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it's, I have to do this and I have to do this. And then all of a sudden, maybe the decisions you're making aren't the best decisions.
Right.
And so I think a little bit of conservatism when it comes to tasting some success is probably pretty important too.
Frugal comes up a lot. Frugality.
Yeah, frugality.
And that's one of those traits that can be double-edged, isn't it? Where it can be a strength and it can be a weakness.
Mm-hmm.
If you're too frugal, you wouldn't even start a business.
Absolutely.
You would be afraid to invest in the equipment or the lease for the space or a fleet of trucks, the things that you got to do. Like, I'm too frugal to do that. So, that could be a problem on the other end, but just not frugal enough to where you're going to be willing to start the business, but not spend the money for a while.
Right.
And build up a reserve, because economies come and go, recessions, progression cycles.
God, you guys are hitting the nail on the head.
Yeah. And looking long term.
Yeah.
And looking long term, because, it's spending that money for equipment and doing that. It's like, well, God, that's money that I could have at the end of the year to put in my bank, but you do that for 2 or 3 years and all of a sudden the shit's broken down and your people are upset and they can see you're just squeezing the business. And so, that long term going, well, yeah, I don't mind spending this money because I know long term it's gonna work. And it's gonna pay off in the end.
Trust the process.
Trust the process.
This is what's always driven me nuts about like the venture capital industry and some portion of it, and maybe it's overrepresented in the media or whatever, but I experienced it and saw it like firsthand too, going down to Silicon Valley after my first company was sold, is like the lavish spending, even when you're bleeding money, on your P&L, but the sort of temperament that we're going to raise more money or that, that it's not going to end. It doesn't matter as long as we're growing. We can, and I can never sort of reconcile those two things because it could be money in the bank. And it just seems like irresponsible to sort of be behaving like that. Like, when you don't know if it's really successful yet, but some have made it through that cycle. You guys got to understand. I mean, it does work is the weird thing. Like they don't make money for 15 years and then they go public and then they start making money. So there's bright people that have gone that route, and have seen those outcomes, but from the outside in, it's just, it's tough. And this is one of the reasons why I like this podcast concept, guys, for us talking like this as entrepreneurs. I just don't think that represents the majority of businesses, 99%, and maybe it's 98. You're not going to have that outcome. You got to do it. You got to do it figuring out these calculated risk and do I take money out now? Do I invest it? And so that's good advice.
Do you think there's a little bit of a shift? I mean, you have, in my opinion, you kind of have these two basic, there's a lot in between, but two basic business models. There's growing a business for revenue and growing a business for profitability. And since the 90s and the tech and the ability to scale a business because of technology, it has gotten so focused on revenue and not profitability. And I mean, you and I talked about this. I mean, I think that obviously that doesn't go away because people are always looking for the big idea that's going to pay everybody a ton of money. And those are 1 out of 1,000. But I think investors are looking a little bit more on the actual profitability of a business versus just revenue growth.
Yeah. I love that. I love that question. And the concept of the pendulum swinging, there's so many, there's different data points, right? And I think one of the things is driving the pendulum to swing back to that, looking at it through more of a profitability lens is just the interest rates, right? So, if VCs or PE firms are using a lot of leverage capital, now their risk profile just changes a lot when it goes from 2% to 5%, if you got 60%, 70% leverage. So So yeah, you now need to think like the margins got tighter real fast. But there's an old sort of kind of saying in the kind of the money space, but like VCs is the dumb money and private equity is the smart money. Okay, so and I mean it's an overstatement because really VCs are going for a 1 out of a 10 hit, so they can afford to be dumb. Okay, that's the business model. Like I'm going to push every business in my portfolio to grow beyond their means because, or maybe it is in their means. We don't know. We're trying to invest in markets like that, but I'm okay if those 9 fail, as long as the 1 hits and 2 you're just golden, like you're one of the top in the valley, right? Well, PE firms, that's not how they see the world, right? They need it's risk capital, but it's a much different risk capital. So I think the PE firms are driving more of the discussion around margins. That PE firms may actually do the opposite. They may actually create harm because they're so interested in keeping the margins at a certain place, and now they sort of stunt growth. So maybe the pendulum swings back the other way, but I think those are, in my simplification of the world, those are sort of the goalpost, if you will. And in a higher interest rate environment, the VC is going to struggle. But I think the whole pushing, going back to the 1 out of 10, that would kind of drive me nuts about this is like, so those 9 that fail, right, and the 1 that works, the venture capitalists make all this money, but those 9 that fail, there were people, there were founders, there was their lives. It was the once in a lifetime idea that got mismanaged, and they spent maybe, it didn't fail overnight because they had VC money. So it took 4 to 10 years, so maybe longer. And so you're kind of like, and that's okay. We'll just go on to the next one. So I didn't know any of this stuff until I was older, right? And I was kind of able to see a little bit more clearly what the role of VC was, because they're already wealthy, right? If you're a partner at a venture capital firm, you've probably already done something, or you inherited money, whatever you did. Made some good investments before, like you invest in Yahoo or whatever. Now they're building on the next one, or you were a founder of a company and now you're starting a VC. So you got a lot of, this is some percentage of your portfolio that I want to say doesn't matter to you. It matters, but it's not like the same percentage that it is to an entrepreneur.
For sure.
So I feel people get pushed in directions that don't really warrant where they should be. And, if the average age of an entrepreneur is 25 years old or 24 years old down in Silicon Valley, you're more susceptible to that.
Do you think that the failure rate 9 out of 10 is actually adjusted because of the venture capital money and the directive that they give towards? So do you think that it could be a 50-50 if they didn't have that kind of money? That's interesting.
I don't know if they didn't have that kind of money, but if they sort of looked at the business model differently, right? Because that's why I say the P's end up being they say the smart money. And there's probably plenty of those that fail too, but because they're not necessarily buying those kind of businesses. They don't like the valuations of those businesses are going like 400% a year or two. I mean, the big ones will sort of, but they're looking more like, hey, is this thing cash flow? Is it what its margin like? Do I have something I could, roll up or bolt on to another company to create more value in my portfolio and that kind of thing. So there's this kind of adage. It's like the rule of 40. And I think this is VCs are kind of falling into this too, but the rule of 40 is, to get your best valuation on a company, you're either growing 40%, no margin, 0, but you're growing 40% every year. That company's going to get valued a lot. But it might be the same value as a company growing 20% with 20% margin, or 10% and 30% margin from a PE's perspective, right? So if you're less than 40, if you're growing 10%, you got 10% margin, they're going to value your business less. Unless you might get a premium if they have like sort of a roll-up strategy or something. But I think they run a pretty tight playbook, which we can go into all that stuff, because like my last business sold to a PE firm, and I advised another guy who sold a company to a PE firm. I sold to a strategic, but they were backed by a PE. It was a PE that was rolling up these companies,
like businesses.
And so I talked to a lot of PE firms in this process, and I'm sure with like your YPO group, you guys have probably talked about that too. But which actually, that's an interesting thing. Unless you guys want to debate this, or not debate, but just kind of talk about it more, is what's been the value of like those kind of peer groups? Like he's part of like YPO group. I had a peer group thing. Do you feel, how has that helped you? Would you recommend that for people, most people to try to establish or build one?
Yeah.
Because you've been in that for a while now.
20 years.
So they saw they kind of lived
They've been with
failures.
me through all of it. Yeah. Well, most of it. Yeah. I can't recommend that enough. And it's, I was fortunate and fell into a group of people that we've just continued on. And that's rare. I mean, we've had the same group of 8 guys for 20 years that meet every month for 20 years.
So what, I don't really understand.
YPO is Young Presidents Organization.
Okay.
So when I was in my flooring business, I was the president of the business. And, at that time, there were criteria. You had to have a minimum of 8 employees and minimum of 10 million in revenue to join this group, which, I qualified for. You 49 out. When you turn 49, you can't be part of it anymore.
You're not young anymore.
You're not young anymore. So, but well before 49.
So what illusions you have of yourself, your ability on the volleyball court? You're not young.
Yeah.
At the back, as I'm stretching out.
Well, especially for me, again, because I don't have a partner and I was relying on myself for everything. It was really important for me to maintain this group because these are all people from one guy who's got $1 billion business to down to my size. So there's just so much to learn, and you can bounce ideas off of people. You can try to recognize blind spots, and it's not always going to happen. Like I said, you're gonna still have to learn a lot of that on your own. But highly recommend some kind of a peer group for anybody. And again, that's luck. I feel like I lucked out in that scenario to get a group of guys that we all like each other and respect each other. But I don't know. I guess I don't know how materially would affected things today, but it sure has made it more enjoyable.
Yeah.
Just because there is a sense of comfort there that you've got some people to lean on and to bounce ideas off of. So
it's a good alternative. And even if you have a business partner, if you are going alone, to sort of be in that construct, because you're dealing with similar issues, right? Managing employees or growth or financing and, capital and all that kind of stuff. So I'm sure you've gotten a lot out of it over the years. And I'm curious on that. I'm sorry, Eric, I think if you were going to say something, if I'm jumping in too fast on this one, but I kind of geek out on this whole pattern recognition thing with entrepreneurs and stuff like that. So, we were talking about risk tolerance, perseverance, frugality has always been a big one of Eric's too. And do you see the same sort of traits with all these guys? I mean, or do you feel like you have similar profile of people essentially? And
yeah, I think there's different levels of risk tolerance for sure within that group, but there's probably the commonality is a level of confidence in your own ability. Not to say that we don't all have, and we have discussions sometimes, and it would come from somebody I would never expect in that group to say, I was nervous or insecure about this decision. It doesn't take that away. But I do think that the commonality in that group is just a sense of confidence that in your own ability to make stuff happen. I would that would probably be the single biggest commonality in that group.
And how do you develop that? That's how does one develop that level of confidence? So you and I we were doing one of our van drives. We were talking and you just reminded me of it. And Bayard goes like, "Well, Pete, like, what did you say something like, where'd you get your confidence? Was it confidence or something else?" And I was like, and you're sure? And I go, well, I didn't even think I had that really, like, until you kind of said it. And then I was like, well, gosh, I guess it's just like over time, you of enough risk, you start believing that you can do kind of anything that you want within the reason of what I feel like I'm capable of. Like right. to the same thing you said, I never had this sort of like willingness, one, because this is bigger, the bit more of the trade-off picture. I didn't have the willingness to say, I want to build a company with like 1,000 people, because I know that's just going to lead to more headaches. And yeah, there may be more money at the end of that cycle, but maybe, Maybe not. Maybe I've sold more stock and I got more bosses. Like it always felt like more headache to me, but I felt within the range that I could build something. I felt like, yeah, I could go and do this, you know? And
Yeah, I remember. I think
how
the
got
question
there.
I asked you was, where did you get the confidence to start your own business?
Do you remember what I said?
Yeah, I think it took you back a minute and you thought about it and you thought maybe it wasn't so much confidence, but it was your desire to, kind of your dad
Yeah.
and
The
kind
chip
of
on the shoulder.
just like, just to what I can't find the right word, but we all, I don't know, I think we probably all have a little bit of this in, to, make your dad proud kind of thing, like
Yeah.
that kind of desire
Jeff
to
talked
be
about this
successful.
too. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a good thing.
Or-
Absolutely.
Yeah. God, that's a weird kind of hold that a parent can have over, I mean, unknowingly, or do you feel like some of that is proud, but also like the chip on the shoulder? Are you like a chip on the shoulder guy?
I'm not.
Because you're a pretty mellow dude. Like when it comes, I've known you all these years and running your business, even the way you sort of describe, I feel like, I just wonder, like we talked about this, like how big is the chip on the shoulder? Like some people's is massive.
It's massive.
Like maybe their dad's pissed them off or they, failed or something happened, and they're just like,
which is okay.
I mean, that's a nice driver,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if it drives you, I don't see any harm in that at all.
You got to have drivers.
Yeah.
Like it's too hard otherwise,
You felt some of that too?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Chip on the shoulder.
Was it the chip on the shoulder? I mean, was it your relationship with your dad was that way where there was a chip, or was it just, I don't know, was it just wanting to I don't know, have him be proud of you?
I think there's always that element, of wanting to make your parents proud of you. And a lot of times, particularly your dad, because he's a lot of times the one that's a little tougher on you than mom is. Mom is a little nicer and, more loving and caring. And dad's a little bit more like, that's not going to cut it. And you hear that and you're a little kid, and you're like, oh man, I got a long ways to go. So of course that plays in, at least it did for me. And then from there, the chip on the shoulder from, being kind of not well off
Right.
at all, like
Right.
basically in a small town and
Mm-hmm.
not have, clipping coupons and
Mm-hmm.
even to the soup kitchen sometimes. And I mean, it wasn't super cool. And so
Right.
that kind of generated a chip. And
For sure.
and I had a couple of teachers. Well, I had one teacher told me I'd never be anything. I really appreciate that he said that. I want to give that guy a hug.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I don't really, but maybe he said it knowing that would drive you.
I think he knew that. That's what I think is
because
he was good friends with my sister. She was a straight A student, and I was just cut up in class, and he knew I had potential, and he probably knew that I was going to be the guy that's going to step up to that statement and go,
Right,
"Oh yeah, you're
right.
wrong," because he didn't tell everybody
Yeah.
that I saw. I mean, I was the only one in class that he told. He said it in class.
In front of everybody.
In front of everybody. I was like, oh, yeah, really?
Now,
Okay.
And that sticks with you.
Oh, it's on. Yeah, so that was definitely the first chip for sure
Mm-hmm.
that I could point to.
yeah.
There's probably more. Over time, we might kind of drum those up too. But yeah, so yeah, drivers, want to make people proud. Don't want to be poor. Got a chip
Mhm.
on your shoulder. I
Mhm.
mean, I'm kind of a blend, but yeah, I could tell you don't have a chip. It just seems like you're like even keel and you're just not wanting to be broke.
Right.
Well, he
Yeah.
he wants to have things too. Like I've
Yeah.
seen the Fox with his like motorcycles, and timber sleds, and then what's coming around the corner now? It's an eco bike. Like, so those all take a little
Yeah.
kashish, you know.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, this is 20 years later. though.
Yeah. No, totally.
Absolutely.
Yeah. How's your work-life balance? Like 10 years ago, how was it as compared to today?
No, that's a good question. I mean, I think it's pretty good. I do. I think I've worked hard at that. I mean, again, I could squeeze more profit out of the business and probably get by with a few less people and work more. But I'd rather not do that. I'd rather make a little bit less and have a life balance. And there's times I got to spend the whole week and work 60 hours a week sometimes still. I mean, that happens.
Mm-hmm.
Dealing with employee stuff, or, you know, I'm starting this new thing, and so now I'm working more. But it's critically important. I mean, when I moved to Bend, that was my thing. I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do, but my focus is my kids. And I know that I grew up and had a really positive, for the most part, childhood with my parents, and we had no money. So I know it's possible to raise healthy kids without any money. And so, you know, that was my focus. My focus shifted when we moved to Bend to, I don't need to have a ton of money. I don't want to be broke, but I also don't need to be you know, multi-millionaire and sacrifice family to do it. So yeah, I've worked hard at that.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we talked about a couple times is just, so what's that next thing you're going to buy that's going to make your life X amount better, and how much does that thing cost? And, you know, oftentimes they're kind of a mirage, you know, that you idealize this Corvette or some kind of thing when you're a kid, and then you go and get it, and it's kind of cool, but, you know, it maybe a little lackluster by comparison to some of the simpler things like freedom of schedule.
For sure.
Yeah.
It seems simple, but it's
everything. No, you're right. And so whatever those 2 or 3 things are, when you kind of attain them, like that, you have to decide, is that enough for you? Like, and I don't know if everybody, I don't know why there's such a thing to always do better than you did the year before, grow faster. Like, isn't there some point where it's enough? Like, it doesn't make sense, but it doesn't, I don't know. I wonder sometimes that with like peer groups and stuff like that, where people, like you said, you got $1 billion like, you know, is that okay? Like, if you're not that, like, it should be. I mean, ultimately we answer that for ourselves, you know, but man,
that's a huge thing. The life work balance is huge because, you know, without bringing up names, I mean, the $1 billion guy's got, he works way too much, you know, and I don't think there's a balance there. And so, you know, the stuff that I think that we spend our money on now is the snow bikes and the dirt bikes. Just get out. Experiences. Yeah. You know, that's what recharges my batteries is getting out and doing stuff and going on adventures. It's not necessarily the material thing. Sometimes you have to have money to do it and to buy something to get you out there. But at the end of the day, it's more focused on that now. Yeah, we'd like a bigger house, a nicer house, but we don't want to be, you know, again, in a situation where we're leveraging ourselves too much. So yeah,
still a little bit frugal along the way, despite the success. Yeah,
for sure. And I think one of the drivers for me was, you know, going back to childhood and how we were raised and everything. I thought it was very positive. We didn't have money, but one of the things I wanted to do is, if I wanted to be a race car driver, I couldn't do that. You know, it takes money. Yeah. If I wanted to be there were certain things in our childhood that we were restricted from at least going after because we didn't even have the money to do that. Like you're talking about sports, you know, it costs money to do sports. So one of my drives with my family was I just want to always have enough wherewithal where if they want to try something or if they want to kind of pursue their dreams, that there's at least something there to help them do that. Which we didn't have, and I don't resent that in any way, shape, or form. I don't resent it at all, but it was something that kind of stuck with me as far as, you know, I just want to be in a situation where we can foster those dreams for them because it's something I didn't really have.
Did you want to become a race car driver?
I did, actually. I did. And I still might.
I still might. I love that you're like keeping that window open.
Maybe there's a 55 and older class. I don't know.
It really comes down to that. I was denied my dreams. I live this other life. On that note, you know what? In all seriousness, too, we have been at it for an hour now, give or take. So I don't want to chew up too much more of your time today. But I mean, I could keep going down a lot of different roads here, of course, you know, and I hope maybe we could pick it up another time because I got some other kind of ideas that are just I just want to hit with you guys, like, you know, the values that you have when, I don't know, but I'm going to sort of table it anyways, man, it was cool, man.
Yeah.
Thanks for taking the time to
it's
chat.
very
I
cool.
know usually this is in the van. We're like breaking this stuff down, but
Yeah.
you know, some of this stuff I don't know about people, you know, until you ask the question, right? And so
Right.
it's cool to hear guys get into their, you know, details and motivations, and so that was awesome, man.
So do you have a podcast by?
What do you mean?
You know, like when we're done with the podcast. I got a signature sign off.
Not really good at that one yet. You know, when I was kind of going solo, I would try to get my Pearl Jam song lined up. I'd end with that going. Won't divide it. I don't know, but
Anyway,
no, we're
good.
not big time yet. So
It'd
Yeah,
be
I
a
know.
Loser by Beck, you know, singing a song about being a race car driver, butane on the brain.
Oh.
right on, boys. All right, man. We'll catch you guys in a little bit.
All right. Cheers.
stuff.
Forward. Thanks, Bart. All right, cool, dude. Thanks, man.
That song, that Beck song. In a time of chimpanzees, I was a monkey.
I
Butane
don't
on my
even
brain.
know that. I don't even know that song.
It's basically like a
Loser, so
guy in the
annoying.
sticks wanting to, you know, be a race car driver, but he doesn't have the money for the car, so he's always kind of saving up money. And it's not all about that, but anyway.
I'll be damned. That's a good pull on your part. It's like Pete does it all the time with movies. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about, man. I don't have that kind of mind.
Yeah.
I probably don't either. I just look out every once in a while.